city staff to come with you with a very stable, I think responsible budget, but also a reflection of how this budget has been shaped by really the last 7 years of effort by city staff to gain a hard-earned stability that I think we can all take, that we've all had a role in, and that we can all take pride in. You know, I was thinking about, in thinking about crafting this budget and pulling this together, how our approach to budget making has been influenced largely by the crisis that we went through in 2008 and 2009. And every budget cycle, we essentially are coming at it with that sense of you know, preparing ourselves for the deficits, preparing ourselves and trying to anticipate those variables that could turn against us, that in 2008 and 2009 so often did. My goal in the decisions that we make through this budget process is and the expectations that we set as far as how the city approaches our budgets, that we achieve the goal that we never again find ourselves in that crisis mode. It's my hope that the decisions that we have made, and by establishing this new standard of stability for city budgets, that the benefits will be appreciated by our community for many years to come. And councilors have played an important role in that effort, and I thank you for your support. And the willingness of councilors over the course of these last 7 years to choose the long-term health of the city, the long-term fiscal health of the city, even when faced with unpopular decisions. I also want to thank Dave Montgomery and Peg Spihar, Sherry Bushman, and the department directors for their really outstanding work in pulling this budget together. So we kind of talked about the importance of stability, the avoiding the massive deficits, the wild swings in both revenues and expenses that got us into a lot of trouble just a few short years ago, and also decreasing the level of variability from year to year. You'll see in this budget that there's not a whole lot of change from 2014 to 2015, and that's a positive thing for our community. It's a positive thing for our residents, for our staff, and certainly the health of our budget. There's a greater sense of security for our staff and for our operations. We now have a budget reserve that we've been maintained at over 10% for the last 3 years, and this budget will continue that. We will show a debt picture that our GO debt has reduced from $87 million in 2009 to $63.5 million in 2014. That's a $23 million decline in our general obligation debt. We'll also see very large increases in our reserve funds. The general fund reserve that was at a negative $1.5 million at the end of 2008 is now over $7 million. And an OPEB fund, our retiree health care fund, that in 2008 was at $13 million, is now over $40 million. That is an investment in the future. It's an investment for stability for future taxpayers, and making sure that we have dollars available to meet those what had been unfunded obligations to pay for retiree health care into the future. I think there's a real difficulty in maintaining this approach. There's always pressure to improve services, to increase expenses. I think there's a danger after now several years of stability to lose our edge, to lose our commitment to the principles that gain this stability. It is, in public life, a tenuous hold, and we can lose it quickly and return to deficit governing. And I think we are all stakeholders in making sure that does not happen. And I would point out that right now we only have 2 of the 9 counselors that lived through those very difficult and painful times, and Counselor Gardner and Counselor Fosley. And I think so throughout this process, I think we will be looking back to the type of pain that we experienced during those 2 years as a reminder to what we need to guard against into the future. So with that, I think I'm going to ask Sherry to pass out the budgets, and we can kind of go over some of the highlights of this budget. So in many ways, I think this budget, and kind of being at a bit of a crossroads, could go one of two ways. We could use the temporary budgetary strength of this budget and of the city in the current day to make permanent commitments in terms of expenditures that will go on and limit our ability to be flexible in the future. Or we can use our current budgetary strength to increase the likelihood of future stability. And again, I think we've made some decisions within this budget that translate from some short-term difficulty or investment that would result in a long-term stability. So if you go to the first page, the levy page, and walk through that, you'll see that in general operations, there is no change to the levy to support general operations this year. We do capture new growth because we have seen growth in property tax base in the form of new housing and new businesses building in the city of Duluth, and that results in $114,000. Again, that is revenue that comes in that does not have an impact on the tax rate paid by our taxpayers. On the debt service, you will see an increase in the debt service, and I want to explain how this, or the reason for this increase. It's actually in response to the 2 years of austerity that we had in 2008 and 2009. We have a 5-year equipment bond note that we issue, and we kind of have, here's our average, and in 2008 and 2009, in order to address this kind of crisis that we had, we dramatically reduced our equipment purchase in those 2 years, which reduced our bond, and that was the appropriate thing to do at that time. Now, over the last couple of years, we've kind of gotten back to just that normal replacement cycle for things like police cars and trucks and fire engines and the like, but the years that are coming off are those lower years. And so while we haven't made any changes in the expenditures in our debt, because the years that are coming off are the lower years and we're replacing those with average years, there is this impact. And so we have that 1.6% levy increase to address our debt service requirements, and that is that this budget represents a 1.6% increase to the city portion of our residents' property tax bill. Practical terms, looking at a house valued at $155,000, it is a $9 increase. That is an annual increase, so it would be 75 cents a month, again represented in this budget. The next page, you'll see kind of the general fund by type, and there's a couple of points that I will highlight. One is under revenues, near the bottom, earnings on investments. Earning on investments, you'll see that in the 2014 budget that we're operating under right now, there's about $305,000. And you'll see that we've zeroed that out for next year. Earning on investments is one of the most volatile revenue sources that we have in the city of Duluth. And it was one of the major problem areas in that 2008-2009 budget cycles. Because in 2007, the stock market was booming, we had great returns, and they plugged in a big number, and then 2008 happened, and everything crashed, and we lost that revenues. So what we're doing here is essentially making an expenditure, $305,000, and we're saying we're going to dedicate those dollars to our OPEB trust fund for our future liability and retiree health care. Putting those dollars there, which can absorb the variability in that number. So it may be 305 $1 one year, it could be $1 million the next year, all to the benefit of the Retiree Healthcare Trust Fund without impacting in creating that variability within the general fund. Those are the type of decisions that we've made consistently over the last few years, and it's the type of decision that, if councilors agree, will increase stability, increase our OPEB trust fund, allowing future mayors and future councils the ability to then draw down on those dollars to address the increased cost of retiree health care. Also in this budget, point out the pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, which also has a significant number. One of the decisions reflected that this is a significant increase from 2014 to 2015, but it actually is less than the full amount that we anticipate will come to the city next year. This budget takes over $400,000 of anticipated pilot and dedicates it to the street improvement fund. And so we have over $400,000 increase that can be used for street improvement next year based upon this budget, and also kind of a reflection of, again, taking the variability on the high end of that pilot, knowing that hopefully we won't have another winter like that, hopefully we won't have a spike in gas prices again, taking that variability, and instead of making long-term permanent commitments with those revenues, we're dedicating it to a source that can be used as a one-time expenditure. We also have in this budget a relatively large investment in public safety, and they take three different forms. One is an increase in the cost of salaries. Second is an increase in overtime costs. And third is we're experiencing a legislative mandate to make a significant contribution to para. So all in all, we're seeing about $900,000 of increased costs related to public safety departments, essentially to maintain the status quo. And that is certainly frustrating, but it's, I think, our commitment to maintaining really vibrant police and fire departments in the city of Duluth is a priority for this council and for the city. And so we've had to find a way to come up with that $900,000 within this budget to dedicate to that purpose. In addition to kind of find that balance within our budget, there is a 3.5 FTE reduction in staffing from the 2014 budget. And you'll see, councilors, on the next page, that general fund summary, that our proposed 2015 FTEs are 589.8. And just to put that into context, for comparison's sake, that is 30 FTEs less than we had in 2008. And this is a number that really jumps out at you. In 1999, there were 712 FTEs in the general fund. Today we have 589. And again, I would give tremendous credit to our staff and our managers who are continued to deliver excellent service despite the fact that there are approximately 125 fewer staff today than there were 15 years ago in the city of Duluth. You'll also see then on that next page kind of a breakout of the changes. And again, this is a relatively minor shifts from 2014 to 2015 in our staff. Again, just a few short years ago, we'd see much larger changes in our staffing approach. The other thing that I'll point out on the reason that we were able to reduce the number of FTEs for next year is largely based on the investments that we've made in IT over the past 5 years. We have made an investment to modernize our systems, to put modern tools in the hands of our employees, and we are seeing the results of that. We're seeing efficiencies in the workflow, and we, through attrition, are able to reduce some of, especially the support staff that were often just processing data. We're now able to put tools in the hands of the staff that are out in the field, and they're able to enter that data directly into a handheld device and reduce the redundancy of them collecting the information, bringing it back to the office, and having somebody else enter it into that system. So we are beginning to see some very tangible signs of the efficiencies achieved through that investment in IT. The next page is kind of that, again, another overview of the general fund budget. Again, you won't find a lot of variability in these numbers, and these are largely the same that you've seen on other pages. And then the rest of the budget really gets into the nuts and bolts of the budget. So in summary, this is a budget that addresses 4 important priorities for the city of Duluth. It sends an additional $400,000 to the street improvement fund. It increases public safety budgets by $900,000 to cover increased costs for the police department and fire department. It continues our commitment to make short-term sacrifices in the form of moving earnings on investments off the general fund for the long-term health and benefit of the city budget. And it provides a 0% tax rate impact for general operations and an overall 1.6% increase to the tax rate for city services. This is the first step of the process, as I mentioned before. We look forward to more detailed conversations in the month ahead. This is a brand new process for several of the counselors here, and I just want you to know that we are always open to questions. We hope that you go through this budget in fine detail, and you know, to the extent that you can send your questions to us ahead of time so that we can come prepared to the meetings to come. That's always helpful and appreciated by our department directors. I think as you go through this budget, you'll find that there are no surprises. The changes that I've mentioned here today are the primary changes reflected in this budget, and there are very few other changes, which again I think is reason to celebrate and take pride in the progress that we've made from a few short years ago when we saw much more variability, required variability in our budget to achieve the stability that we now enjoy.